Nancy Hastings arrived in France in 2018, full of military accounts, maps, photographs, and passion. She made contact with two local experts and calls them into duty to trace the steps of Chester Schulz. Richard Tucker runs a service called Tucker Tours, giving military history excursions around the area of Sedan. Christopher Sims retired after more than 40 years with the American Battlefield Monuments Commission, the organization which maintains American cemeteries and monuments in Europe from both world wars. In the backyard of a bed and breakfast in Sedan, Richard, Christopher, and Nancy lay out their plans and discuss strategy to find Chester's footsteps.
Well, on the last day, there's a big push to take Sedan because there's a huge rail yard here, a railroad, and if they can get that, they've kind of got control of the whole area. And so that's why the Germans were holding it so strongly. So the 1st Division has got 5 different groups heading just kind of like a shotgun approach so that they can kind of get them from all sides. And they spread out, but they went over into the area that should have been the 42nd Division, because if you look here, see this pink is all 42nd. And the 1st kind of is here, and they're here, and they're here. They kind of went out of their boundaries, which they were given orders that they weren't supposed to pay any attention to boundaries. And there's a lot of confusion even among the Americans because they're normally their divisions have boundaries that they keep within, and they had an order that said no boundaries, just go for it. But it was kind of a miscommunication and all of that. So the 1st Division kind of gets mixed up with the 42nd Division, and there's confusion as they're heading toward the battle. But it was a really hard push. Mm-hmm. But they kind of, I think, went a little over and above board and kind of went too far that way because they were getting into the French, because the French were over here. And they had to leave the evening of the 7th because the French said they were going to start firing on them if they weren't out of their area. So it was kind of an infighting between the different divisions because everybody wanted to get Sedan. Everybody wanted to be the one that got the glory of capturing Sedan. I don't know that there was much time to think about what you were doing. It probably just like, this is it. This is what we've trained for a year, and come over here and we're gonna do this.
We had reckoned without a German rearguard action, and no doubt they had heard us telling our men to get ready. They were soldiers who had trained 4 years at the front. They had left their lines checkerboarded with machine guns, had left their men in the rear to fight to the death, and had slowly moved out of the heavy masses of troops. Most of us who were young American officers knew little of actual warfare. We had daring, but not the training of the old officer of the front. The Germans simply waited, and then laid a barrage of steel and fire, and the machine gunners poured it on us. Our company numbered 200 men. Within a few minutes, about half of them were either dead or wounded.
This is coming from Chehry. This is the first intersection that takes you down into Chevauche. Over there, and this way is up to Sedan.
But I don't think that would be, even though the tree looks fairly similar.
Yeah.
I mean, this branch on this side does. I'm not seeing the double branch here.
Mm-hmm.
It may just...
90 years, 100 years later, I'm not sure you could compare the branches. I don't think you can do that.
The cemetery had to be about where that circle is.
For me, the question is, there's 8 or 9 people who would have been, 4 or 5 that are in a line together and then others dotted around.
Yes.
My assumption is they've grouped those with others somewhere else. And this must be a road coming in, it must be one of these, if it's this area. Or it's just somewhere else.
But if it's this road coming in, and this were right here, the sign would say Sedan that way, Chehry that way, which would make sense.
But that would mean that this cemetery is on the other side of the road.
Yeah.
On this side of the road?
It must be, because if it's turned right we're coming like this. So those graves must be on the east side of the D977, whatever it is. So it can't be that.
They went around the town. They went around the cemetery, which kind of sits to the east of the town. And as they came around, I guess there's a hill north of there, and the Germans had a machine gun nest up in the hills, and so they were firing on them. And of course, the Americans were trying to take that hill. And at some point in there, Chester was hit by the gunfire. And of course, there wasn't a whole lot of reports from his buddies, because they're moving on as well. Everybody's kind of like on the move, and you can't like stop and take care of anybody who's been hit. I've never been under fire. I hope I'm never under fire. But I'm sure you probably don't have much thought other than surviving maybe, or making it through this, or trying to shoot before you get shot. I don't know. I think probably once he was shot, it was probably oh my, I hope I can get home. I hope it's not bad enough to kill me. But I think he died fairly quickly because of where he's buried. He didn't survive long enough to be taken back to a hospital.
Well, when Chester Schulz was killed on the 7th of November near Chevreuse, there was a burial party that would initially have hastily buried the remains and moved forward with the troops towards Sedan. Towards the end of the war, of course, they were advancing pretty quick, so they also had to advance pretty quick to bury the dead. And in some cases, well, there are cases that these guys were also killed in action while tending to the dead. Between 7 November and the armistice, with all the rain that was coming down, some of the remains may have been uncovered by the rain.
According to Christopher Sims, they pretty much buried him where they fell. And you can kind of tell that because there's 8 graves, and 5 of them were grouped together. And there's one over here, and another one there, and one a little farther away. So, we would think, oh, they bring them all together and just make a row, but they didn't. They are buried in kind of an unusual pattern. So it pretty much leads you to believe that's where they fell.
Finally, after months of emailing back and forth, finally meeting in person in that backyard in Sedan, driving around the countryside, holding up pictures to see if they matched the landscapes, and a whole lot of soul-searching. Richard, Christopher, and Nancy settle on a site that they think is very close to where Chester took his final steps. Just a few hundred meters outside the now idyllic village of Chevreuse.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
it bends to the left, then it bends around to the left, bends around. Well, I mean, if they got here and they went for ground, the bullets are still going to be hitting them, aren't they? It's also more likely they'd be near the road, because they might be able to think they can dash to where the track is, and there might be a ditch next to it or something. Once they get to here, they're not going to run away. They'll go to ground. They just keep shooting at them until they've shot enough of them. They can't run that way. It's too far, and they're exposed to get to the road. So
Well, I'm going to say this is where.
Yeah.
Leave it there. My great-grandmother would have loved to have seen this spot. Been here. I think we're pretty close. I mean, I'm sure it's not the exact spot, but it's got to be fairly close. So, yeah.
How close?
Well, I know it's in probably our vision, within our, maybe 20 steps each way. If we made a circle around here, probably would be in that area. Kind of a group consensus, especially with their knowledge, kind of where this is probably the spot of the way the battle would have played out. It's a beautiful spot right now. It's a beautiful resting place. I mean, you can't pick a prettier spot. If you're picking a spot for a cemetery, even back home, they look for a place with a nice view. he had a good place.